Welcome to Critical Reading Video 4. Here we're going to talk about question 3. And I'm going to go ahead here and summarize all the rest of the rules that we're going to use. In the subsequent videos, we're going to just focus on using these rules. We're going to be done with the rules. We're going to focus on using these rules to answer the remaining questions. Okay. So what's the next rule? Well, if we look at this next question, it says, as used in line 2, and it depends on what set of notes you're looking at. It may say line 3, tracked most nearly means what? Okay. So, rule 6, if the answer does not emerge, go on to the next question or the next question. What do I mean by this? Well, you see here that this is in line 2. Line 2 means very early on. So, if we look at the previous question, we're looking in line 1, 2, we're looking in 20, 21, 36, 37, 43, and 45. And if we look even at the previous question, I said the answer didn't emerge until we read the second paragraph, right? What this is telling me is that sometimes the first couple questions, and it doesn't even have to be the second question, you may have to skip like 1 or 2 or even 3 questions before you get to a question that is sooner in the passage. So we can see here that line 2, question 3, the answer to question 3 is very early on. Tracked is right here. So, with that being stated, don't feel that you have to do the questions in order. In fact, even the passages you don't necessarily have to do in order. And this is where practicing is so important. You have to understand what your strengths and weaknesses are. Do the passages that you can do well first, because you'll more quickly get through them, and then you have more time on the harder ones. So these are things that you've got to keep in mind when you're prepping for the SAT, and you have to practice. There's no shortcut around that. All right, what's the next rule that I have? Well, the next rule that we have is for vocabulary questions. Clearly, this is talking about vocabulary. Notice that the vocabulary is not here. Tracked is not a high tier vocabulary word. We use track for everyone. Most people use track on a regular basis. But the tone is very important here. So it's not necessarily going to test you on your vocabulary, but your ability to really understand what a word means in the context of the situation. Okay. My first piece of advice, do not read the answer choice. Okay, and the reason why I suggest this is, again, is confirmation bias. If you get attached to an answer, like, oh, I write answer choice A, it really sounds really good. You're going to, in your head, you're going to create a bias that's going to make it harder to really understand, to really know if that's the answer. Okay. Rule 2, replace the word with a synonym. Okay, so let's look at this one here, and it says, I'm going to erase this actually. Let's hear. Sorry. Wallace J. Nichols tracked this epic journey with a satellite tag. Okay, so it's talking about the journey of the turtle, and he tracked. So what's another word I could use for track? Well, when I actually did this for the first time, the word that popped in my head was follow. I actually, when I honestly read this the first time, I thought maybe you could use something like stalked, because he's following, but he's very, very closely following, right? So I thought maybe stalked would be kind of a good word. Maybe it's a little too, stalk has a lot of pejorative or negative connotations, so maybe not so much stalk, but the essence of the word. But follows a good representation of it, right? So I'm going to replace this with the word follow. Let's go here. What's the next one? Compare to part 3 of how to attack. Compare to your answer choices. Okay. Now here, followed is answer choice C, right? So I actually chose the word that matched. But I want you to notice how close these definitions are to each other. Searched for, traveled over, hunted. I actually think C and D are very close to each other. Remember I said stalk, but maybe stalk is too negative. You could argue that Wallace was hunting the animal, right? He was following it around, but he was very closely. But hunting has a negative connotation. This is what I mean when I say look for tone. Tone. This whole test is about tone, right? Follow is has a much more neutral or positive tone than hunted, and hence it's the better of the answers. Okay, and that's part 4 of how to follow through in solving vocabulary questions. You have to watch for tone. Okay, but let's also talk about some other rules here, even though we have the answer to this question. Rule 8 is go to where the question is discussing the issue at hand. Okay, so what I want you to realize here is in this particular question, it says line 2. Okay, I didn't read around. I went to line 2. I tackled the question in line 2, and you don't have to stray too far from the question. Okay, sometimes you may want to read a little bit before and a little bit after. If you've been watching all of these videos, then you're very familiar with the first paragraph. Okay, because we've talked about it several times. So the context of the question is there. And this is something else that kind of ties into Rule 8, and this is where I have this ideological difference, okay? So again, there's certain rules that, depending upon who you talk to, they'll say different things. There's sort of this balance between reading versus time, right? You don't have a lot of time. If you read through the passage, often is the case that you just stop understanding what the passage is talking about. So there's most test-taking strategies will encourage you to just go to where the issue is at hand, to not waste time reading through the whole thing. But there is an advantage to reading through. The more you read, the more context you have of the passage, the more you understand the passage because you've read through it. But you're bleeding your time, right? And there is the issue, right? So you have to find your sort of niche. You have to sort of find your balance in all of this. And again, this is something that just practicing kind of takes place. I would encourage you early on, however, to go straight to the questions, go straight to trying to answer the questions without reading the whole passage, and see how effective that is. If that's not working out for you, if that's not improving your score, if that's not getting you to read to do better and faster on the test, then, or I guess it'll make you go faster, but going faster at the expense of accuracy, well, then maybe you need to tweak your strategy, okay? You have to find out what's best for you. And what's best for you may not be what's best for me or best for your neighbor. The last one I'm going to talk about is rule number 9. Rule number 9 actually doesn't pertain to this passage, but it does pertain to many passages. And this kind of goes back to sort of time management. Sometimes it's best to skim through and find where it's talking about the topic, okay? In many passages, they'll be mentioning something, and you have to go to that. If you're not reading the whole thing, you have to skim and find where it discusses that topic, okay? So rule 9 is if you can't find the answer, skim the passage for relevant info. So keep that in mind. In the SAT class, we will go through an example of this, and maybe in a subsequent video I'll make. We'll implement rule number 9. So be on the lookout for that. All right, guys. So this is it for the rules. In the next couple passages, we're going to implement the rules in solving the next couple questions. So look forward to seeing you all there, and keep studying. See you guys in the next video.